You found your way to Whispers of Crimes, a quiet corner where the shadows of the past are gently told. Here, we speak of real crimes and mysteries, not to shock or scare, but to wonder, to reflect, and maybe to help you fall asleep. So close your eyes, let your thoughts slow down, and come with me into tonight's case. Imagine a grand, sprawling mansion perched on the shores of a serene lake. It's a symbol of wealth, power, and a legacy stretching across generations. The Glensheen Mansion, with its luxurious rooms, intricate architecture, and beautiful grounds, seems like a picture-perfect home, a place where wealth and family harmony should thrive. But hidden beneath its lavish walls is a darker story, a story of betrayal, greed, and murder that would forever haunt this seemingly peaceful estate. In the summer of 1977, the lives of two women were tragically taken within these walls. Elisabeth Congdon, a wealthy and formidable matriarch, and her nurse, Velma, were both murdered in cold blood. The question that haunted the community: who could have committed such a brutal act in a home so full of history? Was it the greed of a family member, a crime of passion, or something more chilling at play? This is the story of the Glensheen Murders, a case that remains unsolved in the minds of many. A mystery that continues to captivate those who dare to uncover the truth behind the shadows of the mansion. So let's step inside this once grand estate and explore the twists, the secrets, and the chilling events that forever changed the Congdon family and the legacy of Glensheen. Please be advised, this episode contains content that may be upsetting to some listeners. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Chapter 1. The Glensheen Mansion. The Glensheen Mansion is a historic estate that towers over the northern shores of Lake Superior in Duluth, Minnesota. Built between 1905 and 1908 by mining magnate Chester Congdon, the mansion sits on 12 acres of lush, wooded land with breathtaking views of the lake. Standing at 39,000 square feet, this grand home is a masterpiece of architecture, a stunning blend of classic styles, something out of a storybook where money and old-world charm come together. Inside the mansion, visitors are greeted by ornate chandeliers, antique furniture, and luxurious touches throughout. It feels like a world apart, an oasis of wealth, history, and privilege. This was the home of the Congdon family, one of Minnesota's wealthiest and most respected families. Their fortune had been built upon the mining industry and railroad investments, and the mansion itself was a symbol of their immense success. But beneath the grandeur and pristine exterior, Glensheen harbored dark secrets. What should have been a peaceful estate was soon to become the backdrop for one of the most shocking crimes in Minnesota's history: the Glensheen Murders. Chapter 2. The Congdon Family. At the center of the Congdon family was Elisabeth Congdon, the formidable matriarch. Elisabeth was a woman who valued tradition, wealth, and family above all else. She had inherited the vast fortune from her late husband Chester, and she was the one who controlled the purse strings of the Congdon Empire. Elisabeth was often described as a strong, proud woman, determined to keep the family's legacy intact. However, her relationship with her daughter Marjorie was anything but smooth. Marjorie Congdon, Elisabeth's only surviving child, had long struggled to live up to her mother's expectations. As a young woman, Marjorie was known for her beauty and charm, but those around her began to notice a more troubling side as she grew older. Marjorie's marriage to James Congdon, a man with his own set of financial troubles, seemed like a way to ensure her own financial security. James, however, was more than just a husband. He was seen as someone who wanted his hands on the family fortune, particularly as Elisabeth's health began to decline. With the weight of the Congdon legacy on her shoulders and the tension with her mother mounting, Marjorie found herself at odds with the very people who had once been her closest allies. But it was this very tension, this clash between inheritance and control, that would ultimately lead to a tragedy that no one could have predicted. Chapter 3. The day of the murders, on the morning of June 27th, 1977, a maid entered the mansion to find a scene that would forever haunt her. Elisabeth Congdon, the family matriarch, was dead, strangled in her bed with a pair of her own stockings. The body of her nurse, Velma, was found nearby, also murdered in cold blood. Both women had been killed in the night, without warning, in the safety of their own home. It was a gruesome discovery that shocked the community. Who could have committed such a violent act within the walls of this grand mansion? The police quickly arrived, combing through the estate for clues, but there were few leads. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared to have been stolen. No clear motive for the murders emerged. The more investigators delved into the crime, the more baffling it became. The initial thought was that it might have been a botched robbery. But as the hours ticked on and investigators began to piece together the details, one thing became clear. This wasn't some random act of violence. The person responsible for the deaths was familiar with the mansion. The idea that it might have been someone inside the Congdon circle began to take root. Chapter 4. The investigation begins. As the investigation into the Glensheen murders unfolded, the initial clues seemed to point toward an unknown intruder. Some witnesses reported seeing a man near the mansion's grounds the night before the murders, but no one could provide a clear description. The police scoured the estate, searching for any sign of the killer, but the mansion's large, sprawling layout seemed to hide more secrets than it revealed. Yet, as investigators dug deeper, they began to wonder if the killer was someone within the Congdon family's inner circle. Elisabeth had a considerable fortune, millions of dollars tied up in trusts, investments, and her various holdings. Could the motive have been money? The family's wealth was substantial, and perhaps someone had been driven to desperation by financial need or greed. At the same time, the more personal connections between family members came under scrutiny. Marjorie's strained relationship with her mother was well known in town, and so was her troubled marriage. Marjorie had always been expected to inherit her mother's wealth, but there were signs that Elisabeth was considering altering her will. Could this be the key to unlocking the mystery? The more investigators learned about the family dynamics, the more they began to suspect that the murders might have been motivated by more than just money. It might have been about control, about power, and about family secrets that were kept hidden beneath the mansion's luxurious facade. Chapter 5. The prime suspects. As the investigation honed in on the Congdon family, two names became central to the case: Marjorie and her husband, James. Marjorie had been seen near the mansion the night of the murders, and investigators were quick to note the tension between her and her mother. Marjorie was rumored to have been upset about her inheritance, and her relationship with Elisabeth had been strained for years. But was this enough to make her a killer? Then there was James, Marjorie's husband. James had a checkered financial history, mounting debts, failed investments, and a growing dependence on Elisabeth's wealth to sustain his own lifestyle. He, too, stood to gain from Elisabeth's death. But could he have been involved in the murders? It was known that James had access to the mansion, and he and Marjorie's relationship was not without its own set of problems. Could the couple have been desperate enough to take matters into their own hands? As police gathered evidence, it became clear that the case was more complicated than anyone had imagined. No physical evidence could directly link either Marjorie or James to the crime, and witnesses were inconsistent in their accounts of the events leading up to the murders. Was it possible that someone else had a motive to kill Elisabeth and Velma? Or was the truth hidden within the family itself? Chapter 6. The trial months passed, and the case against Marjorie and James Congdon went to trial. The courtroom was filled with reporters, curious onlookers, and a community eager for justice. The prosecution argued that Marjorie and James were motivated by greed, the desire to inherit Elisabeth's fortune, while the defense contended that there was no solid proof linking them to the murders. Witnesses took the stand, some claiming to have seen James and Marjorie acting suspiciously in the days leading up to the murders. Others testified about the strained relationship between Marjorie and her mother. The defense, however, painted a different picture. They suggested that the murders could have been committed by an unknown third party, someone with a personal vendetta against the Congdon family. As the trial progressed, the question on everyone's mind was, could Marjorie and James really have committed such a brutal act? The evidence was circumstantial, and the jury faced a difficult decision. With no clear murder weapon, no confession, and no direct link to the crime, the trial was full of twists and turns, leaving both sides to wonder whether they would ever get to the truth. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. In the end, Marjorie and James Congdon were convicted of the murders of Elisabeth and Velma. Marjorie was sentenced to life in prison, while James received a sentence of 50 years. The motive for the crime, whether it was greed, power, or a combination of both, remains the subject of debate. Despite their convictions, many questions about the case remain unanswered. The full extent of the family's financial struggles, the true nature of their relationships, and the possibility of other suspects have never been fully explored. The legacy of the Glensheen murders endures, not just because of the crime itself, but because it serves as a reminder that behind the closed doors of even the most beautiful estates, there can be hidden darkness. Today, the mansion stands as a historical landmark, a place where visitors can learn about the Congdon family's legacy and the tragic events that unfolded within its walls. The Glensheen murders remain one of the most chilling and perplexing cases in Minnesota history, a story of wealth, greed, and a family torn apart by a horrifying crime. That's all for tonight's story, another thread in the web of true crime, quietly unraveling as the night goes on. If you're still with me, thanks for listening. And if sleep has already taken you, may your dreams be peaceful and your mind at ease. I'll be here next time by the fire with another story waiting to be told. Good night, and don't forget to lock your doors.